Okay, welcome to the fall season. The time of year is chock full of enjoyable features like cooler weather, changing foliage, and abundance of seasonal food crops. In fact, we are solidly in the middle of apple harvest. So come on the journey through the orchard and find more about this yummy seasonal fruit. So Northern Spy. Some of you may remember your grandmother or mother speaking about this apple. It's the best pie apple. It makes the best applesauce. Everything was the best with the Northern Spy. Discovered in 1840 on a farm of Oliver Chapin in East Bloomfield. As the surviving sprouts of a seedling cultivated from the stock brought from Connecticut that had failed. It fell out somewhat of favor due to the dull coloration, irregular shape, and tendency of the thin skin to avoid bruising and lack of disease resistance, specifically bitter pit and blossom fire blight. But it was resistant to woolly aphid and somewhat to scab. It's not widely available at retail outside of the growing regions, but it still serves an important processing apple in those areas. And we're part of that area. You can find Northern Spy. The Northern Spy was one of 4 apples that was honored in the United States Postal Service in 2013 of a set of 4 33-cent stamps. They were the Northern Spy, Baldwin, Golden Delicious, and Granny Smith. A little bit of apple history. The apple was named the official New York State fruit in 1976. I would have thought it would have been earlier than that. New York is the second largest apple producing state in the country, trailing only Washington, and Michigan is third. The apple industry is established an important part of the traditional Northeast culture. Apple growers not only have a passion for fruit as a hardworking farmer, but they also happen to be savvy business people. Apple farmers not only produce crops, they're responsible for harvesting, packing, and marketing and distribution. Apples are sent to facilities where canned and frozen, and some are put in storage for later use. They're not, but let's not overlook, if you're gonna laugh, the apple wine and the apple cider mills, especially the hard apple cider that we now have at our local stores, restaurants. We obviously live in an apple-rich part of the country, but have you ever wondered why our area is the best? Let's check out some of the conditions in our area that contributes to such sweet success. Apples love New York weather. The perennial apple tree does best in temperate climates, zones, and the fruit trees are found to succeed in areas where winters trend cold, yet summers temperatures are more moderate with bouts of humidity. While considered a hardy tree, an early season frost or freeze can kill blossoms in the spring and impact their fruit in the fall. Apple trees do best when they are planted in full sun and avoid strong, persistent breezes and low-lying cold areas. Despite a couple of cold snaps in the late April and May, followed by unusually hot and dry summer, this year's apple crop has been successful. There are dozens of apple breeds in our menu that are grown right here in Genesee County. So let's choose from these. Believe it or not, we also have some new varieties that are being created all the time. Well, I can't go without talking about nutrition of the apple. Notice the apple in the hand. That is the actual serving size that should happen, not the size of a 20 ounce, which I would rather have. Anyways, that serving size is only 55 calories. A vitamin-packed fruit not only provides us with health benefits, but it also is a shot in the economic arm in New York State. So what is the best apple? What's the sweetest, the tartest, the crunchiest, the best pie apple? Which one stores the longest? There are lots and lots of charts to look at telling you which apple is the best for what recipe. In the next slides, I'm going to go over some of the most popular apples, as well as a few new ones that I located in our county. But overall, you know what you like. Do you like the sweet? Do you like the tart? Do you like apples with a big crunch? So let's take a look at a few apples. Macintosh. Nothing evokes fall better than the aromatic fragrance of a Macintosh apple. This variety has been enjoyed since 1811, when John Macintosh discovered the first seedling. Macintosh apples grow particularly well in New York's cool climate. They're sweet, they have a tart tang, they're very juicy. They have a tender white flesh. They're excellent for eating and sauces, good for making salads and pies. Some people don't like this apple for pies because they say they become too mushy. Macintosh tender flesh cooks down very quickly. If you do use it for a pie, you must use thickener because it's so juicy. They're available September through June, which makes it a good storage apple. Ginger Gold. Ginger Gold, they're sweet with a mild tart overtone. Fine texture, they're crisp cream colored flesh. They're excellent for eating and salads. Ginger Gold is very slow to turn brown. It's also an excellent choice for a fresh cut apple in use. They're available from August through November, which means that they don't store very long, and they're excellent for dehydration. Any of the apples that are going to not turn brown are really good for dehydration. Honeycrisp. Sometimes the name of the apple says it all. Complex, sweet, tart flavor, juicy, super crisp, yellow flesh. Excellent for eating and salads, good for sauces, baking, and pies. This ultra crisp apple appeals to children and teens, and they're a great way to encourage healthy snacking. They're available September through February. Gala. A Gala is a mild sweet flavor. It's juicy. It's a crisp, creamy, yellow flesh, excellent for eating and salads. Gala size and mellow flavor and thin skin makes a perfect choice for lunches and snacks for kids. They're available September through June and also stores very well. Cortland. Cortland is sweet and a hint of tartness. They're juicy, tender snow white flesh. They're excellent for eating, salads, sauces, pies, and baking. They're really good for freezing. Cortland apples are wonderful for kebabs, fruit plates, and they're very good for garnishes because they don't turn brown quickly. Therefore, we know good for dehydrating. Available September through April, so it stores really, really well. Empire. Guess what? Its parents were Red Delicious and Macintosh. So you know you're going to like it. Wonderful blend of sweet and tart, juicy, very crisp, a very creamy white flesh. Excellent for eating and salads. Sauces, they're good for sauces, baking, pies, and freezing. Small Empire are great for school lunches. Kids enjoy the sweet tart taste and super crunchy texture. They're available from September through August. So that's a really long time. So it stores very, very well. Snapdragon. I was new to Snapdragon, but I've heard it's been around longer than I've never seen that. I did find this at the farmer's market. They're extra sweet with hints of vanilla and spice. They're 2 napkin juicy. Warning, very juicy. They're crispy texture, excellent for fresh eating, great for salads, gourmet recipes, and pack a snap for a sweet and healthy snack. If you would like Honeycrisp, you'll love the Snapdragon. Annual high demand means the Snapdragons won't be here long, so you should get them before they're snapped up. Available September through January, but I can tell you they were at the farmer's market, they only had a few. When are they ready? Well, apple season picking begins August through and runs through October. The blackboard on the chart came from Roanoke Apple Farm, and they gave an estimate of time of when things were going to be available to be picked. I found that to be very helpful, so I knew when I should go back and get my apples. Cornell also has a thing called Cornell Orchards. If you're here today, you should pick one up. If you're not here, you can get one through the link. But anyways, it's a really good chart showing the dates of when they're available and also what they're good for. And I found the chart to be very helpful. On the far left is also a listing of different apples. I didn't find all of those around here, but it was a listing of when they're available. Harvest. Apple picking season begins, like I said, in August and runs through October. For the best quality and flavor, allow the fruit to ripen on the tree. The best way to tell if they're ripe, you're going to love this, is to taste it. So when you go to Roanoke Farm, you can actually taste an apple out there to say, oh, it's ready. When they're sweet and full flavor, they're ready to pick. If you plan to store apples, though, you should harvest them before they're fully ripe. In general, early ripening apples, the ones that are early in September or late August, do not keep as well as the ones that are available at the end of October. The fruit should be eaten, the early ones should be eaten and preserved as soon as possible. Later apples keep because they have a thicker skin. Always harvest with care. Handle fruit gently to avoid the bruising. For long-term storage, keep fruit in a refrigerated area or a cooler cellar. Store only fruit that is in excellent condition and the highest quality. Do not store or damaged or diseased fruit. Best storage practices. Number one, keep your apples in a dark, cool place. Traditionally, the best way to store apples is long-term is in a root cellar. Those places were dark and cool. They preferred the environment for the apples. You may not have a root cellar any longer, but you may turn your unheated basement or garage into apple storage. Make sure the room is cool and gets plenty of air circulation. The gas that ripens the apples will also ripen other fruits and vegetables that are nearby. Now myself, I don't have this on the slide, but I actually created some racks of old screens and I put my apples on the screen so it gets the circulation and they don't touch one another. And I have found that they have kept for a longer period of time. That's if I got a good apple. Number two, apples, like I said, apples continue to ripen even after they've picked. So they put up a substance called ethanol gas, and it continues to soften the skin and the flesh day after day. Apples are ripened 6 to 10 times faster if you just store them at room temperature. So therefore refrigerate them. Keep apples cool, help slow down this emission of the gas. So place them in the bottom drawer of your crisper. If you have no other place, then keeping them out on the counter. Number three, separate the rotten apples from the bushel. Yes, one bad apple does spoil the batch. First, any apples with soft spots, bruises or blemishes, keep those bruises away from the other ones. They actually emit even more gas and then speed up the rate of the surrounding apples to ripen and then rot. Number four, store crisp tart apples. The best apples to store long-term are the ones with a thick skin. They're crisp and tart. Apple varieties such as Granny Smith, Fuji, Macintosh, Winesap, Honeycrisp, Northern Spy, and Rome are can usually last up to 6 months or longer. Sweeter apples like Golden Delicious do not last that long. Number five, find apples with stems. This was new to me. I never thought about it. Apples with stems intact last longer than those without stems. Microorganisms can enter the apple through the detached stem area, leading to decay. Number six, source fresh apples. When you're looking to store apples for a long time, get the apples directly from the apple tree or a farm. Grocery store apples have already been stored for a long time, therefore will decrease the amount of time you have to store them in your home. Number seven, wrap the apples before storage. To store whole apples long-term, wrap each apple in paper. One of the articles said newspaper. I myself had found these little green papers that you can get and wrap the apple in, and it really does help. And then gently put them in the box. If you're at home, if your home is dry, you may want to mist the unwrapped apples regularly. You don't need to remove the apple from the paper. Just check the apples once a week and remove any signs of decay. What to do with the surplus? Well, apple butter, that's my new one. You can can it. Apple cider, if you do decide to make apple cider, you do need to pasteurize it. You can freeze a whole apple pie, or you can make just the filling and freeze that. You can can applesauce, or you can also freeze it. You can can some apple pie filling. That's my next job I'm going to try. And finally, you can do apple slices. I highly recommend the apples that do not brown and are super crisp. Those are just a few ideas of things that you can do. Of course, you can save them and eat them too. Apple butter made easy. I recently added apple butter to my array of home canned items in my basement. A simple but long process. So I tried to make it simpler. So you first peel and quarter the apples. And core the apples. You cook them with cider and vinegar until they're very soft. Then you put them through a mill and puree the apples. I actually was able to put mine in a blender and blended them down. At that point, I stopped. I didn't have time to finish. So I'm just telling you, you can stop right there, put it in the refrigerator. I went away and I came back on Sunday. And the first thing I did, even before I unpacked, was I took out my slow cooker and I threw dropped all the apple stuff into the slow cooker along with the spices and sugar, and I cooked it for about 3 hours. I did not have to keep stirring it. So if you do the other step, if you do it the other way on the recipe, it'll say to put it in the pan and keep stirring it so it doesn't scorch. In slow cooker, I didn't have to worry about it. So I just cooked that. It took about 3 hours, and you test it till done. And testing the done, you put it on a little plate, and the water doesn't come out of the apple any longer. And it really does work. I was like, oh, it's going to constantly have water, but it didn't. Then you process it in a hot water bath. This recipe is available for you guys that are here. It's in the back. It also has this came from a variety of places, but all the cooperatives essentially have the same recipe. Those recipes available. I also have other ones that are available for you to make applesauce and how to preserve it properly, etc. So I use a variety of sources. The Cornell guide was very helpful, but the New York State Apple Growers Association, highly recommend going on that site for a lot. I did also find the masterclass articles on how to store the apples was really, really helpful. So those are a variety of places that I use. And my photo sources, I did go to Roanoke Apple Farm, and I also went to the farmer's market and talked to several of the apple growers there. And also one photo was taken from the Apple Growers Association, and of course the ones from the Postal Service were on there. Upcoming programs, the holidays and swags is November 3rd. And then I'm back in December with gifts from the kitchen. I highly recommend you come this time to the kitchen because you'll get to taste food in December. Any questions? Yeah.
I have a few. What county in New York State grows the most apples?
I didn't find it by county, so I can't answer that question, but I can look it up for you and get back to you. It just said that we were second in the country. So.
And when it says wrapped apples, what?
They use newspaper and you just wrap it around. I found these little green wrappers on Amazon and you just wrapped them around it and they kept very, very well. And so.
Catherine, can you repeat the question?
Oh, sure. Okay, so her first question was, what county in New York State has the most, which I'll have to research and get back. The second question was, how do you wrap what newspaper? So it's just newspaper. Any more?
And that temperature range, it's awful cold. So do you just have a separate refrigerator for that?
The temperature range was quite cool. And I found that my basement was cool enough. And I do have a thermometer in my basement. So I'm probably at the higher end of that range of the temperature. But, you know, so it also means like you could have it out in your garage, as long as it doesn't freeze, you're okay too. So you could be out and put it out in your garage without heat.
Because it said 30 to 35.
Right.
And my basement is nowhere near that.
Yes, my basement's very cool.
Wow.
Yeah,
Okay.
but you could also put it in your garage if you have a
Thank
garage. Mhm. Any other questions?
I got a question. I'm not a cook either,
Hmm.
but do you always have to peel your apples?
Before canning? Do I have to peel the apples before canning was the
Can you
question?
cook it and then squash it and then separate it?
Okay, I would have told you last week, yes, you don't have to, but unfortunately I did read the Cornell write-up and it said you must peel for all of their recipes. So, yeah. But unless you're freezing, then you don't have to worry about it.
I noticed that a lot of people who grow apples like in their backyard and stuff, they always say they have to spray.
Mhm.
Is that necessary? Do you know?
So the question is about apples. Do I need to spray my trees? I didn't do any research on spraying or not spraying. I did more on what apples to use for whatever. But as far as I know, I've had friends that don't spray and they have fine apples. It all depends on, you know, how the bugs go, I guess. You have any answer to that, Jen?
Yeah, as far as spraying, because I think it's Siska here. Apples are often sprayed. Do we have to get rid of the chemicals before storing them? So that's another question. So let me talk about apples with diseases. So apples have a lot of disease and insect issues. Now, apple breeders have been working on getting trees that are more resistant to our more common diseases like apple scab and fire blight. So you can actually go out, if you're a home gardener, and look for some of those varieties. There's probably, we could find you a list. But yeah, a lot of things attack apples. So chances are, if you have them at home, at some point in time, you might have to have some kind of either fungicide or insecticide. Probably more likely fungicide, because they do get a lot of leaf diseases. So apples are just one of those plants that they can be grown organically, and we do have information on that, but be ready to have apples with worms or spots or whatever.
I do know from going to the Roanoke Apple Farm, they were telling about getting rid of certain rows of apples and putting in new ones. And they're going to continually do that. And they're looking for ones that don't have the problems and are
More
also easier
resistant.
to pick.
Yeah.
So they were looking for different kinds of trees.
So we do have again, this question from online about how to get rid of chemicals before handling them or storing them or canning them or freezing them. Would it just be the peeling of them, I think, and
You would-
washing them?
Washing them. When I was doing things like making apple juice and things like that, I actually took a tablespoon of bleach to several gallons of water. It's a very minimal amount of bleach. So you wash them first and then you bleached them and then you washed them again, just putting them through the water. And that can help you get rid of anything that, you know, I was serving students and I had to be very careful. So.
Up in the storage area, they're dunking their boxes all the time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I don't know if it's fungicide or.
So that he mentioned that they were dunking the boxes in storage areas, and I don't know because I didn't research that part of it. So,
And not sure either, but that could be partly because, yeah, I'm not actually sure because they don't pick up apples off the ground anymore because of salmonella issues from
Yeah, you can't.
geese and deer and other animals.
Yeah.
Yeah.
yes, please do not pick up the apples off the ground and use them.
All right. Are there any questions from anyone out in our Zoom audience? You can either put it in the chat or you can unmute. We do have a small group, so if you would like to do that, or if there are more questions from our in-house audience.
Yes.
Quite a list of apples here. Have on your sheet.
Mhm,
I'm just curious, with one of our favorites, a 20 ounce.
mhm. Oh, it's not on there.
Huh?
It's not on there. I didn't see that.
No.
20 ounces available right now. They're great for baking and applesauce.
But for pineapple, that's primarily what we use.
Yes. And they have pretty good storage. So I don't know what the amount of storage is for them, but I know that we used to keep them at least through December at my house. But yeah. Yeah, I'm sorry that that's not on there. That was only one-sided. Yes.
If you buy a bag of apples, someone has already decided what to put in there versus pick your own, which you know what you want. So what do you do if a lot of them have those brown spots on them and go to another bag and they have brown spots?
Are you buying them at the, she asked about the buying of apples. Are you talking about buying the apples at the store or buying the apples at like the farmer's market?
I guess it'd be the store.
If I was buying apples from the store, I really look over my bag of apples. And when I go to store them, I seriously look them all over and I wrap them, but typically I don't buy them from the store. I buy them at my markets and things like that, supporting the local. But last year I did buy a half bushel of apples and I bought the wrong kind and they had spots, every single one, and they lasted me 2 weeks. I was cooking them all up. I was so disappointed. Yeah.
what brand was it? And also, what does the word scabs mean to us as consumers?
Okay. I don't know what the apple was that I bought last year. I just know that I won't go and buy it. And I know who I bought it from. And two, scab, can you explain scab? It's pretty much just ugliness, isn't it? Just-
Well, scab, there's actually a disease called apple scab. So it makes black spots on the skin of the apple. It affects the leaf first, but it can also affect the apple as it grows. And they actually get kind of a black, almost crusty looking spot on the apple. You just, if it's on your apples, like if you're growing them home, you just cut that part off. Yeah, it doesn't usually affect the interior of the apple. It's more a blemish on the skin.
Yes.
I was gonna comment that apples that go to supermarkets are dunked and they are waxed most of the time,
Mhm.
because you can't afford to have imperfect fruit on the table. It has to be perfect, so they are inspected and treated and waxed. A nice shiny apple is probably better than, more saleable. should I say.
They'll keep a little bit longer too.
They do.
Yeah.
Well, and apples are notorious for easily bruising, which is where you get your brown spots. So even when they're picking them, there's a certain technique that the farm workers have to use so that you don't get fingerprints when you're picking your apple. Any jostling or hitting something can bruise an apple very easily.
Really?
Yeah,
I mean, you see pictures of them dumping them.
I know.
and then dumping them in a big
But
boat.
yeah, I mean, that's how they do it. But yeah, it depends on the pressure too. So you don't want to be whipping your bags of apples around the grocery store and throwing them into your cart. So, but that, I mean, they are really, they can be rather fragile once they're to a certain place. And for those of you who like to start your spring flowering bulbs early, don't put them in the refrigerator or next to your apples, because that ethylene gas also kills the flower buds in flower bulbs.
Good to know.
Yeah.
Yes, Jane.
Someone told me that if you have green tomatoes and you want to pick them now and make them ripen, you put them in a brown paper bag with an apple, and is it what, ethylene or something will ripen them? Is that correct?
So the question was about putting green tomatoes in with apples in a brown paper bag. Yes, the apples will ripen them faster. Your tomato will have a slight smell of apple, just to let you know, just to let you know.
Thank you.
Yes.
Have you explored the future of apple picking? Because I did read they were growing them a certain way and anticipating robotic picking. Had you heard anything or?
I didn't hear about that from where I was, when I was going to Roanoke Apple Farms. They're going to get trees that are easier to pick. So I guess shorter and wider is what they were looking at, and ones that had less problems. So they were taking out 2 rows of apples at that point, and I was just so surprised. I'm like, where are your apples going? So yeah, but I didn't know about the robotics, but I don't think that that particular farm would be interested in that for what they're doing.
They showed an orchard on TV. I'm not too sure under what circumstances. I don't think it was news, but I think it may have been under a news program.
Mhm.
And it looked like a vineyard.
On trellis.
On a trellis, apples on a trellis.
Flowers, yeah.
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 It was probably under interest of, yeah, on the news. That's
No,
interesting.
it's actually up in Orleans County.
I know, but when he saw it on the TV, it was
Oh.
probably under interest. Yeah.
Can you explain to us about the picking number? Like you wouldn't pick Empire apples until they were 19.
I don't.
The apple hardness,
Mhm.
I guess the harder the apple, the
That-
less bruising.
Right, and that the tighter the skin, the toughness of the skin makes it less to bruise, and it also stores better. So the Empire is really, really good for storage. And but I don't know anything about the numbers. I didn't get into that with him.
Well, every time you put out a new variety,
Uh-huh.
we have to experiment with it.
Oh, I know. And the other one that I saw was the zester, and that one is very, very tasty, they said. And they did have that at the farmer's market, but it was like the last thing that I saw, and I was like, oh, yeah, so I took a picture of it, but I didn't do any more research on it, but I didn't take any money with me that day to the farmer's market, so I couldn't buy any of the apples. Silly me.
I took 5 bushel of apples to a farmer meeting
Mhm.
so that at the meeting, when there was a break, they could have an apple. Those apples disappeared so fast.
Yeah. I'm sorry.
There's 2 more slides.
Oh, okay, sorry. I thought there was this one. Okay, so at any time, ask a master gardener, stop into our office Monday through Friday from 10 to noon. If you have a food question, you can contact me at any time, but I am here on Tuesdays, just to let you know. Those are our numbers, and you could also email us questions. And finally, 1 minute. You can find us on Facebook and YouTube, and you can find some interesting pictures from our last class last week on tomato canning. Is it the last one, dear? Okay. Yeah, one more question.
What hours are you available by phone on Tuesdays?
Tuesdays, 10 to noon,
10 to noon.
10 to noon.
Is that desk out there?
Yes,
Okay.
yes, yeah.
I just
I'm
recently read
I'm also a
something-
master preserver besides a master canner, so, or, yeah, a master, yeah, master gardener and a master preserver, so yeah. So anyways.
All right, well, if there aren't any more questions, thank you, Catherine. This is very interesting. For those of you who are out on Zoom, I will try to get the recipes and that Cornell apple chart out to you today. And also had to request for the slides. So I'll see if I can make it a smaller PDF, take out some of the slides that maybe aren't as informative, and hopefully your email will be able to accept it, but we'll give that a shot. And so our next garden talk is in November, Holiday Swags and Bows with Jane Grellinger. So you can register on our website for a Zoom link or attend in person. I think that one will be pretty interesting. All right, I'm gonna stop the recording now. So thank you all for attending. Have a great rest of your day.
Thank you, Nan.